Why do people shout when they are angry? Asked the master. Because we lose our temper, that's why we shout, replied a disciple. But why shout if the other person is right next to you? The master asked again. This time no one answered. The master then explained, when two people are angry at each other, their hearts are far apart. To cover that distance, they have to shout to hear each other. The angrier they are, the greater the distance becomes, and the louder they have to shout to communicate. However, when two people are in love, they talk softly to each other because their hearts are so close. The distance between them is very small. When you argue, do not let your heart drift away. Avoid saying words that push you further apart, for there may come a day when the distance becomes so great that you cannot find your way back to each other. One day, Buddha was passing through a forest. It was a hot summer day and he felt very thirsty. He said to Ananda, his chief disciple, Ananda, go back. Just 3 or 4 miles behind us, we passed a small stream of water. Bring a little water. Take my begging bowl. I'm feeling very thirsty and tired. Buddha had grown old. So had Ananda. Ananda went back, but by the time he reached the stream, a few bullock carts had passed through it, stirring up the water and making the stream muddy. Dead leaves that had settled on the bed had risen to the surface. The water was now undrinkable. It was too dirty. He returned empty-handed and said, You will have to wait a little. I will go ahead. I have heard that just 2 or 3 miles ahead, there is a big river. I will bring water from there. But Buddha insisted, Go back and bring water from the same stream. Ananda could not understand the insistence, but if the master commanded, the disciple had to obey. Despite the seeming absurdity of the task, walking 3 or 4 miles again, knowing the water was not drinkable, he went back. As Ananda was leaving, Buddha added, And do not return if the water is still dirty. If it is, simply sit on the bank silently. Don't do anything. Don't enter the stream. Just sit on the bank and watch. Sooner or later the water will become clear again, and then you can fill the bowl and return. Ananda obeyed. When he arrived at the stream, Buddha's words proved true. The water was already much clearer. The leaves had moved, and the dust had started to settle. However, it was not yet completely clear, so he sat on the bank and silently observed the stream. Slowly but surely, the water became crystal clear. Ananda filled the bowl, and as he did so, realized there was a lesson in this experience. He now understood why Buddha had been so insistent. Overwhelmed with joy, he returned to Buddha with the water, bowed at his feet, and thanked him. Buddha asked, What are you doing? I should be thanking you for bringing me water. Ananda replied, Now I understand. At first I was angry. I didn't show it, but I felt it, because it seemed absurd to go back. But now I see the message. This is exactly what I needed at this moment. The same is true for my mind. Sitting on the bank of that stream, I realized that my mind works the same way. If I jump into the stream, I stir it up and make it dirty again. Similarly, when I dive into my mind, more noise arises and more problems surface. Sitting quietly on the bank, I learned the technique. I will now sit on the bank of my own mind as well, watching it with all its dirtiness, problems, old leaves, wounds, memories, and desires. I will remain unconcerned, simply observing and wait for the moment when everything becomes clear. For that, Master, I thank you. Once, an apprentice with very low self-esteem asked his master for advice. He explained that he felt terrible because people around him constantly told him he was good for nothing, clumsy, and lacking in the most basic virtues. Would my master, wise as he is, know what I could do to be more valued? He asked. The master, seemingly uninterested, replied, I'm sorry, young man, but I cannot help you. I have a more pressing problem. Perhaps if you help me first, I might be able to assist you afterwards. The young man felt disheartened. Even his master seemed to have little interest in him. "Master," he said humbly, "I will help you however I can." Without offering thanks, the master removed a ring from his finger and said, "Take this ring and my horse, which is tied outside. Ride to the market and find a buyer for the ring. I have a debt to pay, and I need you to sell it for as much as possible, but do not accept anything less than a gold coin. Hurry, it is urgent." The young man obeyed and rode straight to the market. There he approached merchants, showing them the ring. Some examined it with interest, but when he mentioned the price of a gold coin, they either laughed at him or walked away without responding. One elderly and kind merchant took the time to explain, "A gold coin is far too much for a simple ring. It is not worth that amount." One merchant, out of pity, offered him a silver coin and a small copper trinket. The young man knew this was the best offer he would get, but he could not accept it. His master had explicitly instructed him to obtain a gold coin. After exhausting every option in the market, the apprentice returned to his master, defeated. On the way back, he thought, "If only I had a gold coin, I could give it to my master and help him resolve his problem. Then he might help me." He entered the master's room, head bowed in shame. "Master, I am sorry to tell you that I was unable to fulfill your request. The most I could get for the ring was 2 or 3 silver coins, but I didn't think it was right to deceive anyone about its value." The master smiled and said, "That is very interesting, my young friend. But before we sell the ring, we must first discover its true value. Go to a jeweler. Who better than an expert to evaluate it? Ask him how much he would offer for it, but do not sell it no matter his offer. Bring the ring back to me." Once again, the young man obeyed. He visited a jeweler and handed him the ring. The jeweler examined it carefully with a magnifying glass under the light of his lamp. He weighed it and then said, "Tell your master that if he wants to sell this ring today, I can offer no more than 58 gold coins." 58 gold coins! The young man exclaimed in shock. "Yes," the jeweler replied, "and if we wait for the right buyer, it could fetch as much as 70 gold coins. But if he is in a hurry, 58 is my offer." Excited, the apprentice rushed back to his master to share the news. "Master," he said, "the jeweler offered 58 gold coins for the ring, and he said it could be worth even more if we waited." The master smiled gently and said, "Sit down, my friend. You see, you are like this ring, a unique and valuable jewel. However, only an expert can truly recognize your worth. What are you doing in life, expecting everyone to see your true value? Not everyone is capable of understanding it." As he spoke, the master slid the ring back onto his finger. The young man's eyes filled with tears as he realized the profound lesson he had just learned. Three people were walking along a forest path. A wise man, known for performing miracles, a powerful local landowner, and a young student, a disciple of the wise man, who followed a little behind, listening to their conversation. The landowner addressed the sage, saying, "I have been told in the village that you are a powerful man capable of performing miracles." The sage replied calmly, "I am an old and tired man. How could I possibly perform miracles?" The landowner persisted. "They say you heal the sick, make the blind see, and restore the sanity of the insane. Only someone truly powerful could perform such miracles." The sage responded, "Is that what you mean? You said it yourself. Those miracles can only be performed by someone truly powerful, not by an old man like me. Those miracles are the work of God. I merely ask him for a favor, and if the sick, the blind, or the insane have enough faith in him, their prayers are answered. Anyone with faith in God can do the same." The landowner then said, "I want to have the same faith to perform miracles like you do. Show me a miracle so I can believe in your God." At the landowner's insistence, the sage agreed to show him 3 miracles. With a serene look and without moving, he asked, "Did the sun rise again this morning?" "Yes, of course it did," replied the landowner. "Well, there you have a miracle, the miracle of light," said the wise man. "No," replied the landowner, "I want to see a real miracle. Hide the sun, draw water from a stone. Look, there's a wounded rabbit on the side of the path. Heal it with your touch." The sage then asked, "Do you want to see a real miracle? Isn't it true that your wife gave birth a few days ago?" "Yes," the landowner replied. "It was a boy, my firstborn." "There you have the second miracle, the miracle of life," said the sage. Frustrated, the landowner said, "Wise man, you don't understand me. I want to see a real miracle." The sage asked again, "Are we not in harvest season? Is there not wheat and sorghum where just months ago there was only bare land?" "Yes, just like every year," answered the landowner. "Well, there you have the third miracle," said the sage. The landowner, still dissatisfied, said, "I don't think you understand what I'm asking for." But the sage interrupted him, sure of the man's obstinacy. He said, "I have explained well and shown you all I could. If what you found is not what you were looking for, I am sorry to disappoint you, but I have done my part." With that, the landowner walked away, disappointed that he had not seen the spectacle he was seeking. The sage and his disciple remained by the path. Once the landowner was out of sight, the sage approached the wounded rabbit, picked it up, blew gently on it, and healed its wounds. The young man, puzzled, asked, "Master, I have seen you perform miracles like this almost every day. Why did you refuse to show one to the gentleman?" The sage replied, "What he sought was not a miracle, but a spectacle. I showed him 3 miracles, and he could not see them. To be a king, you must first be a prince. To be a teacher, you must first be a student. You cannot ask for great miracles if you have not learned to appreciate the small ones shown to you every day. When you learn to recognize God in the little things that happen in your life, you will understand that you don't need any greater miracles than those God grants you daily without you even asking. Miracles happen every day. Simply having life, for example, is one of them. A monk who enjoyed meditating in silence decided one day to get into a boat and row to the center of a lake. There, he thought, he would find perfect tranquility to deepen his meditation. Once in the middle of the lake, he closed his eyes and began to reflect. How peaceful it was. But suddenly, as he reached the deepest phase of his meditation, something struck his boat, breaking his concentration. The disturbance frustrated him so much that he thought, "As soon as I open my eyes, the person who hit my boat will hear from me." His anger flared up, yet when he opened his eyes, he saw only an empty boat, probably carried there by the wind. In that moment, he realized that his anger did not come from outside, but from within. "Every time I get angry with someone," he thought, "I will remember that anger resides within me. Anger is born inside us, no matter how much we believe the cause lies elsewhere. When something disturbs our inner peace, we often blame external factors. We convince ourselves that someone or something is at fault for our feelings of anger. But in truth, we are the ones who choose anger as our response. Emotions are created within us, and we must learn to control them. Why get angry with another person when it is an emotion that originates within ourselves? It is up to us to decide how we channel that emotion. It is natural to feel anger. How could we not when we are focused on something and external events disrupt our concentration? However, how we manage that emotion is entirely our choice. We can briefly feel angry, but then think, "It's all right, these things happen," or we can choose to unjustly punish the person we believe caused our frustration. The choice is always ours. A samurai warrior went to see the Zen master Hakuin and asked him, Where are the gates that lead to heaven and hell? How can I enter heaven and avoid hell? The samurai was a simple man. Warriors are often straightforward, without cunning or complex reasoning in their minds. They know only two things: life and death. He had not come to learn any doctrine. He simply wanted to know where the gates were, so he could avoid the gate of hell and enter heaven. Hakuin answered in a way that only a warrior could understand. "Who are you?" Hakuin asked. "I am a samurai," replied the warrior. "In Japan, being a samurai is a mark of great prestige. It signifies being a perfect warrior, a man who would not hesitate for a second to risk his life. I am a samurai chief. Even the emperor himself respects me," the warrior said with pride. Hakuin laughed and replied, "A samurai, you look like a beggar." The samurai's pride was deeply wounded. Forgetting the purpose of his visit, he drew his sword and prepared to kill Hakuin. At that moment, Hakuin calmly said, "This is the gate of hell. This sword, this anger, this ego. They open the gate for you." The samurai immediately understood. He paused, took a deep breath, and slowly put his sword back into its sheath. Hakuin then said, "And here the gates of heaven open." He continued, "Heaven and hell are within you. Both gates exist within your own mind. When you act unconsciously, driven by anger, pride, and ego, you stand at the gates of hell. When you are alert, calm, and conscious, you are at the gates of heaven. The mind itself is heaven. The mind itself is hell. It has the capacity to become either. Yet people believe these places exist somewhere outside themselves. Heaven and hell are not destinations at the end of life. They are here and now. Every moment the gates are opening. In a single instant, you can move from hell to heaven or from heaven to hell. Once upon a time, in a place that could be anywhere and in a time that could be any time, there was a beautiful garden filled with apple trees, orange trees, pear trees, and lovely rose bushes. All of them were happy and content. The entire garden was a place of joy, except for one deeply sad tree. This poor tree had a problem. It didn't know who it was or why it was there. "What you lack is focus," said the apple tree. "If you really tried, you could grow tasty apples like me. See how easy it is," said the apple tree, proudly showing off its juicy fruit. "Don't listen to him," said the rose bush. "It's much easier to bloom beautiful roses. Look how stunning they are," it said, as dew glistened on its delicate petals. "But my oranges are sweeter," added the orange tree. The confused tree, desperate to fit in, tried everything that was suggested. But no matter how hard it tried, it couldn't grow apples, roses, or oranges. The more it failed, the more frustrated and unhappy it became. One day, an owl, the wisest of all the birds, visited the garden. Seeing the tree's despair, the owl exclaimed, "Don't worry, your problem is not unique or insurmountable. In fact, it's the same problem faced by so many beings on this earth. I will give you the solution. Don't devote your life to being what others want you to be. Be yourself, know yourself, and to do that, listen to your inner voice." And with that, the owl flew away. "My inner voice? Be myself? Know myself?" The tree wondered in confusion. But then, as if something within it clicked, the tree closed its eyes and ears, opened its heart, and finally heard its inner voice. The voice said, "You will never bear apples because you are not an apple tree. Nor will you blossom with roses every spring because you are not a rose bush. You are an oak tree. Your destiny is to grow tall and majestic, to provide shelter and a home for birds, shade for travelers, and beauty to the landscape. You have a purpose. Fulfill it." Hearing these words, the tree felt strong and self-assured. It resolved to be everything it was meant to be. In time, the tree grew to its full height, spreading its branches wide, offering shelter, shade, and beauty. It became admired and respected by all. Only then was the entire garden truly happy, with every tree and plant celebrating its own unique purpose. A small wave enjoyed life in the sea alongside her companions. She leapt, hid, and played with the dolphins and seagulls. Her life was full of joy and she felt truly blissful. She loved being a sea wave, but one day the sea currents carried her closer to the shore. There, she noticed other waves heading towards the rocks, growing bigger and bigger. Eventually they would burst into foam and crash against the rocks, disappearing forever, or so it seemed. Filled with anguish, the little wave sought help. She noticed another wave nearby, happily playing with the seagulls, just as she had been. "What are you doing?" the little wave cried. "You're so ignorant. How can you be so happy when you don't realize that soon we'll end up crashing against the rocks and disappearing forever?" "Ignorant? Me?" replied the other wave calmly. "I think you're mistaken. The ignorant one is you, little wave. Haven't you realized that by bursting against the rocks we don't disappear? Instead, we become more united and form the sea itself?" In that moment, the little wave finally understood. Alone, we are insignificant. Together, we are immense. Together, we form something far greater. This Buddhist fable reminds us of the strength and greatness that come from unity. A single wave may seem like nothing, but together they form the vast and powerful ocean. Often, we become consumed by our individuality, forgetting that each of us plays an essential role in the larger fabric of life. Each person, unique and irreplaceable, contributes to creating something much greater than themselves. The fable also suggests that the end of life, as we know it, is not truly the end, but the beginning of something different. Through this metaphor, the story shows us that when a wave crashes against the rocks, it ceases to be a wave, but does not cease to be the sea. It does not disappear, it merely transforms. Long ago, there stood a temple on an island, 2 miles out to sea. This temple was adorned with 1,000 bells, big and small, crafted by the finest artisans in the world. When the wind blew or storms raged, all the bells would ring in unison, producing a symphony that captivated everyone who heard it. But over the centuries, the island sank into the sea, taking with it the temple and its bells. An ancient tradition claimed, however, that the bells still rang unceasingly and that anyone who listened carefully enough could hear them. Moved by this legend, a young monk traveled thousands of miles, determined to hear the bells for himself. He sat for days on the shore, opposite the place where the temple had once stood, and listened attentively. But all he could hear was the crashing of waves against the shore. He tried with all his might to block out the sound of the waves, hoping to hear the bells. But it was in vain. The roar of the sea seemed to flood the entire universe. He persisted in his efforts for weeks. Whenever he felt disheartened, the wise men of the village would reassure him. They spoke with reverence about the legend of the temple bells and of those who had heard them, affirming that the legend was true. Their words reignited his determination, but only for a time, as his weeks of effort brought no results. At last, he decided to abandon his quest. Perhaps he was not destined to be one of the fortunate few who could hear the bells. Or perhaps the legend itself was not true. Resigned, he resolved to return to his temple and accept his failure. On his final day, he decided to visit the shore one last time to say farewell to the sea, the sky, the wind, and the coconut trees. He lay on the sand, gazing at the sky and listening to the sound of the sea. That day, he did not resist the sound. Instead, he surrendered to it, finding the roar of the waves sweet and soothing. He became so absorbed in the sound that he was scarcely aware of himself. So deep was the silence that blossomed within his heart. And in the midst of that silence he heard it, the ringing of a bell, then another and another, until all the 1,000 bells of the temple were ringing in glorious harmony. His heart was filled with wonder and joy. If you wish to hear the temple bells, listen to the sound of the sea. If you wish to see God, look closely at creation. Do not reject it and do not overthink it. Simply behold it, and it is always before you, always here, always now. And that concludes our video. If you enjoyed the content as much as we did, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. Leave a comment below. We'd love to hear your feedback and suggestions for future videos. And don't forget to turn on notifications to stay up to date with all our updates. Thanks for being part of our community. See you in the next video.